His story 25 part 2. Now, before we talk to you about 2 travel, 5 capitalism, we've discussed, well, how capitalism ties to 3 democracy, how that ties to monopoly 1, and how 1, 3, and 5, well, that's a democratic capitalist enterprise of us. We've articulated that, well, it's also the economics of God. And that's a longer part of the story because you actually can't get to new economics, to a new world order, without reconciling with our existing order. And as I've described to you today, or in previous days, I've described the notion that we were intelligently designed to learn the answer to the game, that we are designed to learn to advance to the next level of human existence. And that was both an economic lesson and a moral lesson, and it harkened back to all of our Bibles and good books. But today I'm going to talk about the future of economics. Well, it's the greatest story ever told, part 2. You could say, why was the world created as it was? I won't go to explain it. You could explain it to yourselves. But what I can tell you is that I imagineer, or have imagineered, or have just decoded what already existed, the possibility of a super reserve currency. Now, that possibility can only be procreated within the context of a new global economic enterprise and, well, ultimately justice and peace on earth. I'm going to describe it today more in the context if you're imagining it in America alone. For a lot of you, it's hard to put the entire global economy and the ramifications of that in your mind, but recognize that the whole thing must be done on an entirely global basis to make it really work. But let me just explain to you how it might work. Now, first you must realize that, well, way back in the movie in the beginning, in 2005, 2006, before your guy, Mad Money, James Cramer, got on your TV tubes, well, I told his people, and hopefully him, how to buy the world. I informed them that the earth had a bid. Now that means that the earth had a buyer. The earth has never had a buyer before. Who could possibly buy the earth? Well, it's quite simple. My plan was for James Cramer and his friends and their friends and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and their friends and all the friends of all the people, like all the Facebook friends that have ever been invented from here to eternity, the people of Earth buy the earth from the people of Earth. That is sort of weird. How do the people of Earth buy the earth from the people of Earth? It's simply a matter of trading one set of value or one set of values for others, and, well, trading in one system of currency for another system of currency. Now, let me explain what happens in this new world order. We will unleash massive amounts, this is the premise, of growth by our own actions. So imagine our anemic economy in America going from 2% growth all of a sudden to sustainable 5% plus economic growth. And imagine the developing nations being able to maintain the 10% kind of growth rates that China realized. And so imagine a world growing at orders way beyond where it's been. Now here's what happens. The value of everything rises because the greater the economy, the value of resources and demand rises. And so here's the paradox of the paradigm of buying the world. As soon as you start buying a little piece of the world, the rest of the world gets more expensive. You need to really sort of buy it all out at once. Well, it could be a conspiracy, for example, over years, because only you knew insider information of unworldly proportions. If you were secretly buying the world for the people, could anybody on earth say that was antitrust? If you were buying the world of America for the people of America and turning everybody into a shareholder of the enterprise of America, could anybody truly in government, which you intend to cancel, say that was antitrust? Well, so that's anyway, I have parties here. My party, the Underground Student Association, would have no political parties. The only value of parties is what we do when we celebrate our best efforts together. Now, let's talk about how you do this whole thing. We've talked about the notion of buying the global resources of the world, the resources of the nations, and, well, let's not go into sort of the global scale purchases. Let's get more down to earth. Let's focus on, let's say, the United States. See, what happens is not only do the resources go up in value, but everything around you, the land goes up in value. So, now, of course, there's nothing wrong with the land going up in value, but part of our plan is to recapitalize our debt-laden nations, okay, that are actually our consumer nations, to allow them to continue a consumption pattern a long, long time. Now, how do we do that? Well, you look at the top line and the bottom line, but the bottom line is this. For example, we buy out all your houses. Now, normally, I could go out there and say, I'll pay you market value, but some of you don't have your houses for sale. How do we induce you to sell your houses? Well, it's like a tender offer for all the houses of all the people in all the United States. We'll pay you 1.5 times the market value of your house. Any rational buyer would not sell, right? Well, okay, that's from buying at the top. Okay, all along, we could have known that we were going to conspire to buy from the top out of the houses. We could buy the houses from the bottom. Because, see, we knew, and perhaps we planned, to watch the crash, the financial crash, perpetuated by our own banks and actions, perpetuated possibly by our own conspiracy. That's interesting, and I won't discount it. But here's the thing. The time to bought was in the middle of the crisis, and the place to have bought was through the Federal Reserve. Because, well, what you would do is when they got down to 20-30 cents in the dollar, you buy out the mortgage-backed securities, which fundamentally owns the mortgages. So that's what I'm talking about. You buy out the mortgages at a discount at the bottom. Okay, now, well, in a way, that's sort of cheating, because what kind of market value increase should you give them? Because ultimately, given the other holders, ultimately, you're going to be buying everything out, and you can come back and recalculate and give back parts and what have you. The point is that you exercise a transaction where, in effect, all the houses are bought. And by the way, in your system, you're buying all the banks and restructuring them as you know them as part of the people's enterprise. So the people will have competitive banks, let's say in the United States, but you'll have banks competing for the business with each other, and within the larger scale, some of the functions of banking would be integrated into our new virtual currency system. And I won't go into the details of that. I'm more here to talk about the mortgages. So imagine this, all of a sudden, let's you have an 80% mortgage, okay, or maybe even like you own like 75%, you still have mortgaged on your $100,000 house, and you can do the math as you multiply that 100,000, meaning you have 25,000 in equity and 75,000 you own the bank, or the banks, which we are ultimately buying all the mortgage-backed securities. Okay, here's the thing. When we buy you out, in effect, we're buying you out for 150,000. And so, well, now all of a sudden, and here's the thing, the way we do it is we put half the value of your house in trust in the bank. So 75,000 is in the bank. Now the bank doesn't care whether you sit on the house. In fact, in the long-term view of the bank, since we're thinking so long-term, you, if you want, could sell the house out, or just stay in this house and sit on your equity. There might be other ways to take some of the equity out, but the idea is, and even if you had like a small mortgage, see, those would be small percentages, because within every house, half of the land and the houses would be owned by our bank that prints our currency and in trust. And so, in effect, we are reducing the net price of housing by half in terms of costs. So it changes the economics, and all of a sudden we change the economics of construction. And by the way, the whole economics of banking is moved from a heavily mortgage dependent one, and that's important because the mortgage dependent model is dependent on a stable job market that might be destabilized by our own actions. There are certain industries, such as construction and housing and building, that might expand massively. There's other ones like technology too that might expand massively. But as we change jobs, as we might say, why do we need old-style banking when we have a new virtual currency banking system enabled by technology? Why do we not need old-style government functions when we have direct connections to the people? Why do we need, well, lots of ancillary functions as a society once we start integrating into one where our customer is a shareholder and we have sort of an enterprise guarantee of total customer satisfaction? And so anyway, imagine a world in which the bank owns the piece of the basic underlying action. Now, what does that mean in, well, real scale? Well, see, our bank is also the place which can print money for investment. Now, we could come up with a plan, for example, coming from my vision from California, to build out California. See, I'm saying 1.5. We could easily make California worth 5 times its worth. How do you do that? We build it out, we restructure it, we re-enterprise it. I imagineered, well, say take the Salton Sea, turn it fresh, build a new technology center there, connected by bullet train through the desert, through Orange County and LA and San Diego, connected up through Sacramento and San Francisco, maybe connect up the bullet train all the way to Seattle. Do we leave the Canadians out? Of course not. Connected all the way to Vancouver. See, why can't we build on global scale? Because we can't afford it. Why can't we afford it? Because, well, our debt system was designed to fail. It was designed to fail. That's where it gets biblical. Was it designed to fail? That's one thing I ask, and it merely might be coincidence, and I might be mistaken on this, but I take it as a sign that Muslims were taught not to build a world upon mortgages. And, well, it's like I'm not trying to say one thing or say another. That's a bigger context thing. But I think we can learn from all signs, and the sign is this, is if we have the power to create this super reserve currency by pooling our resources in enterprise together, to restructure it so that we now get return on our capital, we will unleash a spending while basically imagining a sort of retiring the baby boomers out comfortably. See, things and promises that we have made in the country can easily be secured if we can secure economic prosperity for the next 100,000 years. And see, these promises can be met because it is within the growth of our own business model that is our own salvation. And so I could get into more detail, but I'm running out of my 15 minutes of time in my, well, it's like, these are 15 minutes of clips. I don't imagine that any would be 15 minutes of fame in and of themselves. Thank you very much.